Okay. So now, since we created a table called students, it's time for me to create a table called professor. Right? So go to create. There's a create button, right, in the ribbon. And then there's a table, right? So we have a table here. So we already created students. Now we are working on this table, the new table. Just like I said, if this is your first time to create a table, you use which one? Design view. Thank you. So the table name is going to be professor. And then click OK. The field name is, I'll say, professor. By the way, this name, because this is going to be a primary key, and this professor ID is going to be what? Foreign key for the student table. So it has to be the same name. The name has to be matched. So last time I used professor ID. So you have to use the same name. So for example, when I go back to student, I use PROF ID, right? PROF ID. You have to use the same name because this is the foreign key. And then when you look at the professor, okay, go to design view. This name has to be same as the one they use for the student table, okay? The professor ID. But this is, as you can see, the professor ID are common for both tables. So we know that this professor ID is a foreign key. And the data type is, of course, text. And just like I said, by default, the first row is chosen as a what? Primary key, by default. And then we have, let's say name, professor name. The name is a text. And then we have a department. So we'll say just department. I'll say just department name. I'll say department name. Or you can say department name. You can use any name. I'll say department name. And this should be text. Okay. Now, once I finish building this design, this field name and data type, let's go back to view, and then it's time to enter the data, actual data. Once you finish this data field, so go to the data view. First, you have to save the table. So I say yes. And then remember that we use, in the previous table, we use 10, professor ID 10. And then we use professor ID 20. And then we use professor ID 30. And then we use 40. When I go back to the student table, look at the student table. Professor ID is 10, so I use 10, 20, and 30, and what? 40. So I must have, for the referential integrity, right? To satisfy the referential integrity, this professor table must have 10, 20, 30, and 40 to satisfy the referential integrity. I can have a 50 and 60, it's okay, but at least I have to 10, 20, 30, 40. Why? Because student professor ID this table use 10 through 40. So I must have this value. And that way, what, referential integrity is satisfied. Any question? So now the professor name, I'll say 10 is June. Then 20 is, let's say, the Kevin. Who cares? I mean, you can make up. 30 is, let's say, what? James. And Anne, maybe. You just make up. I mean, who cares? And department name for the I'll say come for system. Kevin is a 20 is accounting, so I'll say accounting. And the 30 was in the previous table. What was the 30 in the previous table? 30 was, oops, made a mistake because if you look at the student, oh, actually it's fine, yes. Okay, it's fine. So the 30 is, with James and June, they are in the same department. So there are two professors in com sci, and N is what? 40, let's look at the 40. 40 is English, ENGL is English. So I'll say English. Okay. So that's the end of creating the table for the professor. So let me stop recording.